Hello, welcome. Today we'll talk about data management in HR. Managing data is a critical element of what you and I do as human resource professionals in today's environment, because there has been a dramatic increase in people data. When we talk about people data, we're talking about data that's associated with various groups of human beings that are associated with any organization. It could include employees, it could include customers, it could include any stakeholders, and the fact that you're keeping their data within your systems or corporation. So there has been a lot of questions about data storage and management because privacy and security of data has become a critical component of today's environment. So we need to invest in security and privacy simultaneously. Many companies have integrated the human resource information systems or electronic HR management and enterprise resource planning systems, which are actually becoming a necessity for many organizations. So it's something that we may not have been prepared for in the previous decades, but nowadays it's a necessity for us to have. So what is enterprise resource planning, or ERP? Well, ERP is an integrated business management software that's intended to coordinate and integrate processes and data management across different functional areas of the company, such as accounting, sales, human resource management, information systems, and finance, and so on. So ERP coordinates and integrates processes and data together. It enables stakeholders to take a systems perspective, in other words, a holistic view for decision making. ERP has become affordable for a smaller organization nowadays and smaller businesses because the price has gone down, which is a good thing, and more people can be using it. When it comes to managing data, we also have our own human resource information system, otherwise known as HRIS, which is basically a system used to acquire, to store, to manipulate, analyze, retrieve, and even distribute pertinent information about an organization's human resources, or the human capital, or the people information. So you have a certain amount of input that goes into this HRIS system. The data is kept within the system, used for various reasons at given times. And obviously, as a result of the analysis, you can have some output of this human resource information system. So the goal for us is to make sure that what goes into it, the input, and how it's processed in the middle, and how the input is being used, are all coordinated and sort of like have a loop feedback mechanism to where we can hopefully put in good data and eventually end up with good outcomes or outputs. Electronic human resource management is an internet-based information systems and technology that spans across organizational levels. So it's the automation of transactional HR activities. As you've seen over the last few decades, we've moved from transactional HR activities more to transformational HR activities by being a strategic partner with the organization's overall leadership. So as we do more transformational activities, the good news is that we can use various technologies to reduce the number of transactional activities by automating. Of course, when it comes to data management, there are opportunities as well as challenges. So when it comes to opportunities, for example, nowadays, you can track the employee throughout his or her life cycle, from beginning when he or she arrives in the company until he or she transitions into retirement. You can automate HR functionality basically 24 hours, 7 days a week. And we can have data availability for metrics and analysis at any time it is needed. And hopefully, proactively, the dashboard is showing certain talent data so people can plan properly for growth and expansion. And also with today's HRIS programs or information systems programs within HR, you can have very good diversity of visualization of data. In other words, you make it easier for managers to use that information by readily seeing it as a visual component on their dashboards. The challenges associated with human resource information systems is the fact that it's costly. And most employees have been brought up with traditional HR skill sets, so they were not trained in big data or analytics. So we do have to get our workforce up to date on that. And then another challenge nowadays is the data privacy concerns. With that comes data security concerns and issues that you and I have to be aware of. And not only just be aware of it, but also provide an environment where employees and customers know that their information is being kept private and there are less risks are associated with hackers stealing this information. So we have to align our systems with regulations as well. And when we talk about the employee's life cycle, obviously, in this case, keep in mind it starts before even employees begin working with your corporation. For example, when you're trying to recruit people, when you go to college campuses, or when you're using headhunters to target the most qualified people, that is the start of the employee life cycle in a way. However, the formal or the official part begins when he or she comes into the organization, accepts the job, and goes through an orientation or onboarding process. As part of the employee life cycle process, you do a job analysis and design for every position, every task that's being completed by different employees. So usually, in order to consider that employee life cycle, we often have job analysis and job design. After that, we have employee recruitment and selection process. Finally, when we are having these employees come into the organization, we have training and development for them to get them up to speed with the skills that they need. After that, you always are likely to have employee performance management programs throughout the employee's life cycle to get them up to speed in various positions that they're promoted to or when they're moving laterally throughout the organization. So we also have to maintain a healthy labor relations environment with various stakeholders that are critical to the organization's success. You do have to make sure that employees are paid equitably in terms of compensation. You provide them good benefits and rewards that are comparable to the market or your competitors, at least at any given time. Otherwise, employee turnover will become high because they will leave to the competition. You have to ensure the safety of employees. So OSHA records usually have very strict regulations that we must comply with. And finally, you always have to effectively manage employee exits or transitions into retirement. So the employee life cycle includes a gamut of various HR functions where data can be kept, managed, and used strategically for talent development, talent management, or the development of the human capital capabilities over time, so your people can do well in the market. You want to avoid the GIGO mindset. GIGO basically means garbage in, garbage out, right? So if the data is no good, that means the output will not be good. So we need to put good data in and maintain that, and ultimately the output will be more relevant for your managers in the organization. The good news is once you have this data in your system, you can provide very good visuals of the data for managers to use. Some of the considerations for effective data visualization could include the fact that we need to understand the context in which the data is being provided. You can choose an appropriate visual display that is hopefully easily understood by the consumers, the people who use that data. It's not going to be you who's dealing with the data on a regular basis. You and I, as HR professionals, are simply collecting and putting it into a format where managers and organizational leaders can use it in a timely manner. Keep it simple as possible, so people are not confused and they don't ask you too many questions, because that unfortunately wastes time if they have to call the HR department and ask questions. Focus attention on where you want it to be. Are we losing too many people? Are we having people that we're not using effectively? Are we having lawsuits in some years more than others? Are we recruiting a very diverse workforce, or are we not? So focus attention where you want it to be or where it must be, so it gets noticed and hopefully something can be done about it. Think like a designer and tell a persuasive story that everybody can relate to. When it comes to some of the challenges for data management in human resource information systems, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have to update the skill set of our employees, because most of your employees, if they've been there for a while, they might have gained the traditional HR skills, which deals most of the time with transactional activities that nowadays can be automated. So now we're using increasingly more HRIS in strategic decision-making, and the expectations that HR will become more scientific has to be constantly inculcated in the minds of all employees, so they can maintain the skills that they have, but gain new skills that are more metrics-driven, measurement-driven, data-driven. And employees have to be concerned about the privacy issues. If the HRIS is the repository of personal data, you need to provide assurances to your employees and to your customers how you're maintaining their privacy private. So data privacy basically means individuals having control over the collection, the storage, the access, and the reporting of their personal data. If you're asking employees or your customers to provide a certain amount of information, they have to be assured that it's not going to go into the wrong hands or used for identity theft. So data privacy concerns basically means we have to align all of our systems with the regulations. Legal requirements of maintenance of basic employee data has to be communicated not just to the employees, but to unions and government officials as well. Otherwise, employee concerns will drive them towards other corporations, and they may not be as willing to share the data with you. Nowadays, as you have become aware of those scraping and crawling tools, which are programs designed to clean and pull data from websites and other electronic sources in a systematic manner. If you are keeping all this data in your computer system or in your company, how are you using them? How are you making sure that they're protected? And obviously, if you collect this data through crawling or scraping of various websites, what is the overall purpose? Did you get permission from people on those websites that you will be collecting this data? So again, there are ethical issues and there are legal issues associated with all collection of data and privacy issues. In terms of data privacy concerns, be aware of the recognizability of an individual's personal data. There's anonymous data, there's confidential data, and then there's personally identifiable data. Anonymous data are pieces of information that cannot be linked to any information that might link those responses to a specific person in your company or in the city or in any nation. Confidential data would be data for which people's identities are known by the researchers because of the linking of names or codes, but are not generally disclosed or reported. So we're keeping a separate file for link numbers and names. The academicians usually do this for master's thesis and doctoral thesis when they collect data. Usually a person is identified as population 1, sample 1, etc. So you're recording it that way, you know which person is coded as population or survey 1, but unfortunately, You cannot share that information with others because you promise the population basically that their data would not be shared. So you have to move forward with that because that's what you promised. And if you make a promise, the reason for that is to get good data, because if people are insecure about how the data will be used, they will not share good information with you. And a third issue regarding recognizability of an individual's data is data that is identifiable at the individual level. So personally identifiable data would be data that are readily linked to a specific individual. So we need to provide data security. In other words, we need to provide protective measures that prevent unauthorized access to employee data and to preserve the confidentiality and integrity of that information about employees. We need to be concerned about data security, which is applied to information that is accessible through the internet. And there are threats to data security as well, and that is data hacks, attacks, viruses, human error, which unfortunately makes some of the information available to other individuals at the office, at the organization, or to the public in general. All of them are huge threats to the security of data in today's environment. When it comes to human resource information system decisions, we can follow a specific process to come up with the right outcome or to lead to success for us. So you can do an initial assessment. You can assess the organization's needs and project parameters to determine which information system might be most useful for you. You can evaluate available platforms in the market. Number 4 would be to design the system. And finally, choose a vendor that can actually give you exactly what you need from this human resource information systems. Remember, it should be inclusive and comprehensive and specifically designed for the purpose you're going to use this HRIS system. And when it comes to implementing this HRIS system, people will have different reactions to it. Oftentimes, unfortunately, because we are used to the traditional HR skills in systems, or the fact that we might have done something a certain way for so many years, and you introduce a new system or new information system in HR, that means we are creatures of habit, so we might have some resistance to that. In other words, you're going to have people who have active resistance, passive resistance, people who comply, and then those who are enthusiastically supporting the new system. The goal would be to get all of your people to move from active resistance or passive resistance or just simply complying to actually being enthusiastic supporters of your human resource information systems. Of course, if this resistance to the implementation of new information system is very, very high, you can always use very effective change models. So if you go back to Kurt Lewin's model, he said sometimes we need to get rid of the resistance by unfreezing what is going on right now. In other words, create dissatisfaction with the current status or with the status quo. Then you introduce the change, and then you refreeze. You ensure that the change becomes permanent. This way, anybody in the organization that is resisting it knows that we're not going back to the old method. In other words, when you refreeze the new system, this is the way it is going to be permanently, and hopefully they can adapt fairly quickly to it. When it comes to implementing a human resource information system, create the case for change, create structural change, engage everyone who is involved in the process so you can build their commitment, implement and sustain the change, and finally facilitate and develop the capability of everybody in the organization to effectively use human resource information systems. Remember, if people are resisting, that means they might have a bit of fear that they're not going to be as good or as productive using the new system as they were in the previous process. So if people have done something for months and years, they're comfortable with it, where the new method of HRIS might feel uncomfortable for them. So help them master the skill and use this new HRIS system effectively. As always, you and I need to build a reputation for being an objective, analytic, and a rational professional. So you can analyze the numbers, the data, and all of the facts surrounding every situation to make evidence-based decisions. You can do it. Good luck.